Why was the laughter so loud outside, when inside she could barely breathe? Zubiri stood in the cavernous warehouse, a ring of rusted keys trembling in her hand. They clinked together with every shallow breath she took, mocking her in the silence. The metal walls smelled of rain and dust. The roof leaked, each drop echoing like a slow metronome, counting down the seconds of her humiliation. She had worn the trident of a Navy SEAL mechanic. She had kept helicopters alive under fire, hands steady as rounds cracked the air around her. She had been trusted to fix engines when lives depended on it. But here, back in Riverstone, she was just a broken soldier standing in a broken hangar. Outside, voices carried through shattered windows. Someone had made a joke at her expense, and the crowd doubled over with laughter. She could picture them. The mayor, the retired general, the same men who had once shaken her hand at parades but now looked through her as if she was something scraped from the bottom of a boot. General Dunaway's voice cut through the noise, sharp and sure, even after years of practice. "Holloway's final charity case," he said. The words echoed, crueler than the laughter. They thought Captain Holloway had pitied her, that he'd left her this warehouse, this rusted tomb, out of some misguided sense of mercy. They had no idea what he had really left behind. And tomorrow they would find out. But tonight she was alone, alone with a warehouse no one wanted, alone with memories that weighed more than any metal beam, alone with the question she couldn't shake: why me, Captain? Why this? The rain grew heavier, hammering the roof until it drowned out the echoes of laughter. She closed her eyes and remembered the desert, sand in her teeth, sun blinding, a helicopter down in hostile territory. Holloway had stood over her shoulder, calm while chaos raged. His voice had cut through mortar fire. "You can fix it, Ace. I trust you." Her nickname, no one else used it, no one else believed it. She clenched the keys in her fist until they cut her skin. When she opened her eyes again, she was not in the desert. She was not a SEAL. She was a stranger in her own town. The drive back from the lawyer's office had been silent, except for the rattle of her old truck. 10 years of service, and what did she come home to? Potholes, boarded-up shops, faces pressed to diner windows, whispering about the girl who left and came back with nothing but scars. At the Riverstone diner, conversations had frozen when she walked in. The limp in her step wasn't dramatic, but it was enough. Enough for whispers, enough for pity, enough for judgment. Holloway's girl finally came back. All that potential wasted on military service. She had sat in the corner, back to the wall, same instinct she carried from combat zones. That was when Harriet Langley, silver hair pinned neat, apron creased, had come with coffee. Harriet didn't look at her with pity. She looked at her like someone who remembered. "Captain always knew you were special," Harriet had said softly, pouring coffee as if the words were nothing. But they hit harder than any insult. Aracely had swallowed against the lump in her throat, nodding once. Harriet smiled with that same diner smile, steady and knowing. The lawyer's words replayed in her head. The will, the signature, Captain Holloway's voice, but on paper. "To Aracely Zubiri, I bequeath the Mallister warehouse on Foundry Road and all contents therein." That was it. No money, no explanation, just a building even the rats had abandoned. When the lawyer had slid the keys across the desk, her hand had been steady, her voice flat. "That's more than enough." But was it? She wasn't sure. Now, as she stood in the empty space, she told herself Holloway had never done anything without purpose. If he had left her this, it meant something. She just didn't know what. Her boots echoed as she walked deeper into the warehouse. Light cut through broken windows, illuminating dust motes like ghostly reminders of a life that used to pulse here. Crates scattered, old machines rusting in silence. And in the corner, half hidden behind a filing cabinet, something caught her eye. A photograph. She brushed away years of grime, her breath hitched. It was her, 10 years younger, grease streaked on her face, standing shoulder to shoulder with Captain Holloway. both of them smiling, exhausted after a helicopter repair in the middle of nowhere. That photo should have been lost, but here it was, waiting for her. "You found yourself a treasure, did you?" The voice behind her made her spin. Mayor Blackwood stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. Beside him was General Dunaway, posture straight, eyes like stone. "Miss Zubiri," Dunaway said, her name curling like smoke from his lips. "I see Holloway's charity extended beyond his death." Her spine straightened automatically. "Old habits, sir." "Shame his charity case inherited his junk pile," he sneered, scanning the warehouse with disdain. "All those years serving under him, and this is what you have to show for it." The mayor coughed, uneasy. "We were hopping to discuss the property's future. The town has plans for this area. Perhaps we could make you an offer." Aracely slid the photograph into her jacket. "I'll need time to consider my options." "Don't take too long," Dunaway warned, tone sharp as steel. "Not much call for helicopter mechanics in Riverstone these days." Their footsteps faded. The rain returned to its rhythm. She was alone again, but not as alone as before. The photograph warmed against her chest. Holloway's eyes looked at her from across time. He believed in her when no one else did. That night at the Veterans Gala, she had worn her medals on a simple black dress. They were her quiet rebellion, proof she had earned her place. But General Dunaway commanded the room. His stories roared louder than truth, his glass raised to soldiers who had done the impossible. He never looked her way except once, when he dismissed her service with a smile too sharp to be genuine. "Support personnel, lucky promotion," words meant to cut. She swallowed them whole, refusing to give him the satisfaction. Later, when the town's elite circled her like vultures, she sipped water while they hinted, pushed, suggested she donate the worthless warehouse. Their smiles were polished, but their eyes were knives. She left early. Back at the warehouse, she sat in silence, the photo in her hands again. That was when she noticed it. The frame's backing wasn't original. Holloway always tinkered, always left marks of his handiwork. This one was different. Her fingers worked carefully, prying it open. Something fell out, a flash drive, a folded note, a key card, and coordinates written in Holloway's hand. Her breath caught. The note was simple. "Prove them wrong, Ace. The real inheritance isn't the building." Her pulse raced as she traced the coordinates. They pointed not to some faraway place, but here, this warehouse. She moved crates, swept away dust, her hands trembling as she searched. And then, beneath years of grime, she found it. A concealed panel in the floor, almost invisible. She swiped the key card. A mechanism hissed. Stairs appeared, descending into blackness. For a moment she froze. Memories of firefights, of stepping into danger without hesitation, clashed with the fear of stepping into the unknown. But Holloway's voice echoed in her mind. "You're the only one I trust to make things work." She grabbed her flashlight. And she went down. Motion sensors flickered to life. One by one, lights illuminated a space no one could have imagined beneath the rusted hangar. A laboratory, clean, advanced, alive with possibilities. Computer terminals lined the walls. Machinery slept under sheets. Schematics covered boards. And in the center, waiting, was something that took her breath away. This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. This was Holloway's last mission. And he had chosen her. Her whisper echoed into the silence. "Captain, what did you leave me? What do you do when the dead still find ways to speak?" Aracely stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness until the automated lights fully warmed. The air was sterile, humming faintly with recycled filtration systems that had somehow kept running all these years. Her boots clicked against the smooth concrete floor as she moved further inside. This wasn't a storage basement. This was a sanctuary of innovation. She reached out, touching one of the covered machines. Her fingers found the fabric rough with dust, but beneath it the outline was unmistakable, curves too deliberate, a structure too advanced for any workshop she'd ever seen. She pulled back the sheet and gasped. A prototype, a framework of alloy that shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. She had no name for it yet, but the sheer craftsmanship spoke of something more than weapons or machinery. This was designed with precision, with purpose. Her eyes scanned the walls. Schematics, blueprints, technical notes pinned and layered like a madman's puzzle. But it wasn't chaos. It was Holloway's order. She recognized his handwriting immediately, block letters, neat and deliberate, the same as on the note she'd found in the photograph's frame. Her throat tightened. On the far wall, a terminal glowed faintly, waiting. She slid the key card into its reader. The machine word, systems awakening with mechanical heartbeats. Words appeared on the screen. "Welcome, Ace. Let's get to work." Her breath caught. For a moment her hands trembled on the keyboard. A decade of being told she was support personnel, of being written off as a glorified wrench-turner, weighed on her shoulders. But Holloway had seen through all of that. He always had. She pressed enter. The lab came alive, screens illuminated with archive projects, files unlocked. Holloway's voice, captured in a recorded message, filled the room. "If you're here, Arisley, it means I'm gone." Her knees nearly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the console. "I've left you something more than a warehouse," Holloway's voice continued. "Something they'll want to take from you, but you'll know what to do, because you've always understood better than anyone else. Machines are just tools. It's the purpose behind them that matters." The message ended, leaving her in silence thick enough to choke on. She walked the length of the lab slowly, her mind racing with fragments of memory. Holloway leaning over an engine with her, grinning through oil stains, telling her she could fix anything. The night he'd given her a flash drive mid-firefight, trusting her to keep it safe. The way he had always played the long game while others fought for short-term wins. It was all here. It had to be. By morning, her eyes burned from hours of reading schematics. She hadn't slept, hadn't even thought of leaving. She was still deep in Holloway's world when headlights cut across the cracks in the hangar above. Engines multiple. She shut down the terminal and ascended the stairs. A convoy of black SUVs had pulled into the lot outside. Rain beaded across their polished hoods. The first door opened and Mayor Blackwood stepped out, his politician's smile plastered across his face. Beside him, General Dunaway emerged like a shadow, his eyes scanning the warehouse with disdain. More officials trailed after them, the smell of damp coats and arrogance filling the air. "Miss Zubiri," the mayor began smoothly, "we've come to discuss a proposition that could benefit everyone." Dunaway cut him off, voice sharp as a blade. "The town's offering $50,000 for this eyesore, more than fair considering its condition." Arisley stood in the doorway, arms folded, eyes steady. Her pulse thundered, but her voice remained calm. "Is that so?" "You clearly have no use for it," Dunaway pressed. "What would a mechanic do with all this space? Best to let those with vision take over." She let the silence stretch, her gaze never leaving his. Finally, she said, "I'd like to show you something first." The officials exchanged looks, skeptical, some irritated. But she turned and walked back inside, not waiting to see if they followed. Her boots echoed across the warehouse floor. Slowly, reluctantly, they trailed behind her. She stopped at the concealed panel she had uncovered hours earlier. Swiping the key card, the mechanism hissed open. Cool air rose from below, carrying with it the faint hum of machinery. "What in God's name?" someone whispered. She descended without hesitation, forcing them to follow. One by one, their polished shoes hit the concrete floor of Holloway's hidden lab. And then silence. Pure, stunned silence. Dunaway's face shifted first. Arrogance melted into shock, then sharpened into something darker. Mayor Blackwood's mouth hung open, his eyes darting from one machine to another, calculations already spinning behind his politician's smile. "This," he stammered, "this is extraordinary." "Captain Holloway was a forward thinker," Arrowsley said, stepping toward the central console. Her voice wavered only slightly before steadying. "He believed in preparing for the future, not just reacting to it." She inserted the key card again. The console lit, and then, before their disbelieving eyes, a holographic projection of Captain James Holloway materialized. Every official froze. Holloway's familiar face, solemn yet alive in shimmering light, filled the lab. His voice was steady. "If you're seeing this, I'm gone. And Arrowsley Zubiri, the finest engineer I've ever known, has followed my instructions." A murmur rippled through the officials. Dunaway's jaw clenched. "I entrusted this to her because she understood what others never did," Holloway continued. "This Project Guardian was never meant as a weapon. It was meant to save lives, to carry us forward, not drag us deeper into destruction. And if you're hearing this, it means Dunaway tried to repurpose it." All eyes turned to the general, his face drained of color. Holloway's hologram gestured, and panels in the lab slid open. Gasps filled the room as the Guardian prototype stood revealed, a sleek exosuit, built for resilience, for survival, for rescue. Documents flickered across another screen, detailing contracts, funding, and patents. All signed, sealed, transferred, legally, undeniably, to her. "I've left documentation with the Inspector General," Holloway's voice said. "This belongs to Ace and Ace alone. I trust she'll make the right choice." The hologram faded. Silence fell again, broken only by the soft hum of the machines. Arrowsley stepped forward, activating the exosuit. Its systems powered up, the air filling with a low, steady thrum. Lights blinked to life across its frame. Screens nearby ran diagnostics, confirming the machine's readiness. She turned to the officials, her voice calm. "I believe that concludes our business discussion, gentlemen." Mayor Blackwood stumbled through a few apologies before retreating, his smile now plastered on with desperation. The other officials followed, whispering to each other, eyes wide with the weight of what they'd just seen. But Dunaway didn't move. He stood rigid, fury written into every muscle. "You have no idea what you're doing," he hissed. Arrowsley met his gaze steadily. For the first time, she saw fear behind his eyes. "Actually, sir," she said quietly, "I'm the only one who does. Captain made sure of that." He left without another word. When the last footsteps faded, Arrowsley was alone again in the lab. Only this time, she wasn't empty. She sat before the terminal and opened Holloway's service records, files locked away from the public. Missions never acknowledged, innovations never credited, medals awarded in rooms without cameras. Each page told her the same truth. Holloway had never played for recognition. He had played for legacy. And now he had placed that legacy in her hands. Her fingers brushed the exosuit's frame. Cold metal, yet alive under her touch. She could see the parts they had once discussed during quiet nights between deployments. Ideas born in foxholes, now realized here. Her whisper trembled in the vast lab. "I won't let you down." The Guardian's power hummed in response, as if it already believed her. "How do you prove your worth to people who have already decided you're nothing?" The answer came 3 days later, in the middle of a bitter morning. Arrowsley was still cataloging Holloway's notes when the call reached her. Not directly. Riverstone didn't call her for help. The fire chief called in desperation when conventional means failed. The message spread like smoke across town, until Harriet herself burst into the warehouse, apron still dusted with flour. "There's a fire," she panted. "The old chemical plant, 2 kids are trapped inside." For a second, Arrowsley just stared at her. "They went exploring," Harriet added, her voice breaking. "The firefighters can't reach them. The whole building going to collapse." Arisley's gaze drifted toward the Guardian prototype. Her stomach twisted. She had studied the schematics, tested the diagnostics, memorized every system command, but she had never worn it, never used it. The idea of climbing inside Holloway's creation with lives at stake, it terrified her. But the alternative was worse. She nodded once, "Let's go." The drive to the plant blurred in her memory, headlights bouncing across cracked roads as Harriet clutched the passenger door. By the time they arrived, flames were eating the sky. Black smoke towered into the clouds, thick with chemical haze that turned the air sour. Sirens wailed. Firefighters shouted, faces slick with sweat and fear. Chief Lermer spotted her the moment she stepped out. His expression was grim. "Zubiri." He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Rumors going around you've got something." Arisley swallowed. "It's still in testing, but it was built for this." The chief's eyes hardened, desperate but cautious. "Then test it now. Those kids don't have much time." Crowds had gathered behind the safety tape. The same townsfolk who had laughed at her days before now stared, whispering. Their eyes weren't mocking this time. They were pleading. She climbed into the transport vehicle. Panels hissed as the Guardian unfolded, sleek alloy gleaming in the fire's reflection. The crowd gasped audibly. Her heart pounded as she stepped onto the platform. The suit rose around her, enclosing her body with mechanical precision. Interfaces lit up. Neural links synced. She felt the weight of the machine settle, not crushing but empowering, like stepping into another skin. For a breathless second, fear surged. What if it fails? What if I fail? Then Holloway's words echoed in her memory. "Ace, you can fix anything." The helmet sealed. Her vision shifted. Thermal readings glowed across her display. Structural analysis mapped the building in wireframe. Sensors filtered toxins, feeding oxygen into her lungs. "I'm going in," she said, her voice amplified through the suit's speakers. Firefighters cleared a path. She walked forward, each step sending a metallic thud across the pavement. The heat hit like a wall, but the Guardian's shielding held. Inside, the world was chaos. Flames devoured stairwells. Beams groaned above her. The smoke was thick enough to blind anyone else, but her sensors pierced it. Focus, she told herself, one step at a time. The suit's strength amplified her every movement. She lifted collapsed debris with ease, steel screeching as it shifted aside. Flames licked her armor but failed to penetrate. Every action felt both impossible and natural, as though she had always been meant to wear this. Her thermal scan pulsed. 2 heat signatures, small, huddled close, survivors. She forced her way through collapsed walls, following the readings until she found them. A boy and a girl, maybe 15, trapped in a storage room. Smoke blackened their faces. Their coughs tore through the comms in her helmet. "I've got them," she reported, her voice steady despite her racing heart. 2 survivors, conscious but critical. The girl's eyes widened through the smoke. "You're the warehouse lady," she whispered hoarsely, recognition breaking through fear. "They said you had nothing but junk." Arisley lifted her gently into her arms. "Sometimes junk is just treasure waiting for the right moment," she answered softly. With a child in each arm, she turned back into the inferno. Flames roared louder, beams collapsing in showers of sparks. But the Guardian's shielding deflected debris, her path guided by scanners that highlighted weak points and escape routes. Every step was a battle against heat, against smoke, against the fear that one wrong move would kill them all. Then light. She broke through the final wall. Fresh air blasted against her helmet. The crowd erupted. Cheers, gasps, applause that sounded like thunder. Firefighters rushed forward, taking the teenagers into waiting arms, oxygen masks pressed against their soot-stained faces. Arisley disengaged the suit, stepping free as the panels folded back. Sweat clung to her skin, her body trembling with adrenaline. Chief Lermer gripped her arm, his voice cracked. "That was extraordinary. Without that thing, those kids would be dead." She glanced toward the girl she had carried. The teenager, weak but alive, tugged her mask aside long enough to say, "Thank you." The words lodged in Arisley's chest, heavier than any medal she had ever received. News spread like wildfire. By the next morning, her face was everywhere: local media, technical journals, even national headlines. The Guardian had gone from myth to miracle in one night. But not everyone was celebrating. 3 days later, General Dunaway returned, not with applause but with lawyers. He arrived at the warehouse in a polished convoy, his expression carefully neutral. He waited until the cameras were gone, until the crowd had dispersed, before stepping into the hangar with a folder under his arm. "Miss Zubiri," he said smoothly, as if the venom of their last meeting had never passed his lips, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about Captain Holloway's project." Her jaw tightened. "There's no misunderstanding. The Guardian and all associated technology were legally transferred to me through his will." Dunaway's smile didn't reach his eyes. He slid the folder across the table. "The technology was developed under military contract. These patents belong to the Defense Department, not to a private individual." Arisley opened the folder. Contracts, stamped official, a wall of legal language designed to bury her. Her chest tightened. For the first time since the fire, fear returned. But before she could respond, the sound of boots echoed from the entrance. Colonel Eleliana Reeves entered, flanked by JAG officers. She was calm, steady, her presence commanding. "General," she said, her tone cool, "I'm afraid you're operating on incomplete information." Dunaway stiffened. Reeves pulled her own set of documents. Captain Holloway secured private funding after his retirement. The defense contracts cover preliminary research only, not the finished prototype or its applications. "That's impossible," Dunaway snapped. "The funding required." "James Holloway had many admirers in high places," Reeves interrupted. "People who trusted his judgment, people who shared his vision for humanitarian technology." The JAG officers confirmed it with curt nods. Every line of Holloway's paperwork was airtight. Dunaway's face twisted, fury barely restrained. His plan to seize Holloway's legacy had collapsed in front of him. He leaned close to Arisley, his voice a low hiss. "You won't hold this forever." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't need to hold it forever. I just need to keep it long enough to prove what it's for." For the first time, he looked uncertain. When he left, Reeves lingered. Her tone softened. "Holloway always said you were the best problem solver he'd ever met, that you'd find a way no one else could." Arisley exhaled, the weight of everything pressing against her chest. "Why me? There were others with more experience, more connections." Reeves shook her head. "Because you understood what really mattered. Holloway told me once, you chose to repair a medevac chopper instead of a weapons system, even though it cost you. You chose saving lives over taking them. That's why the Guardian is yours." Arisley's throat tightened. She turned toward the suit, gleaming in the lab's light. Holloway's voice still echoed in her head. "The real inheritance isn't the building. No, it was this, and the lives it could save. What happens when the world finally looks at you, and you're not sure you're ready to be seen?" 3 weeks after the fire, Arisley stood in a briefing room at the Pentagon. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A dozen uniforms and suits lined the long table, eyes sharp, notebooks open. At the far end sat the Secretary of Defense herself, Mayline Okonkwo, calm but unreadable. And at the back, silent, arms folded, General Dunaway. Arisley's palms were damp, though she kept her posture straight. She had faced live fire, repaired helicopters under mortar attack, but this felt worse. Combat had been simple, fix it or die. This was something else entirely. Behind her stood the Guardian prototype, gleaming under artificial light. It looked alien here, more at home in Holloway's lab than in a government chamber. But it was hers now. Her voice was the only thing between it and becoming another weapon. She swallowed hard. The Guardian system, she began, integrates advanced materials and neural interface technology. It allows operators to enter environments that would otherwise be fatal: extreme temperatures, unstable structures, toxic atmospheres. It was built not for combat but for rescue. Her voice steadied as she spoke. She explained the shielding that had let her walk through fire, the sensors that had led her to the trapped teenagers, the systems designed to keep civilians alive in situations where even first responders would perish. The officials asked questions precise and pointed. Could the shielding withstand direct impact? How many units could be produced in a year? What were the costs, the risks? Aracely answered as best she could. Each word was weighted with Holloway's memory. When the briefing ended, the secretary herself approached. Her gaze was level, her tone deliberate. "Captain Holloway's faith in you was well placed. This technology will save countless lives. We're prepared to fund full development under your direction." Aracely felt the room tilt slightly, the words almost too heavy to absorb. She forced herself to breathe. "With one condition," she said quietly. The secretary arched a brow. "And that is?" "The Guardian remains rescue-focused. No weapons integration, no combat applications, ever." A ripple moved through the room. Some officials frowned, others scribbled notes. The secretary studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Agreed. The world has enough weapons. What it needs are better ways to protect people when disasters strike." Relief hit Aracely so hard she almost sagged. Behind them, Dunaway shifted in his chair, his expression carved from stone. For the first time, his silence was not power, it was exile. By the time Aracely returned to Riverstone, the warehouse was no longer just hers. Reporters waited by the gate, cameras flashing. Scientists sent inquiries. Veterans mailed letters of support. The Guardian had captured public imagination, and her once worthless warehouse had become the center of something larger than anyone expected. Mayor Blackwood was waiting at the entrance, too. His smile, once dismissive, was now warm with political calculation. "Miss Zubiri," he said, shaking her hand with both of his, "the council has approved your request for expanded facilities. We're fast-tracking the permits. Riverstone is proud to support your work." She said nothing, only nodded, reading the opportunism in his eyes, but she accepted the support. Holloway had taught her to take tools where she found them, even political ones. Inside, the lab no longer echoed with loneliness. A team now moved among the workstations, veterans, engineers, locals hungry for a purpose. The hum of machinery filled the air. What had been Holloway's secret was now alive, growing, multiplying. Zadin Rhodes, a former Navy comms specialist, whistled as he unpacked crates of components. Holloway was operating on a whole different level. Some of this tech isn't even on the market yet. "He had connections," Aracely replied, tightening bolts on a stabilizer frame, "and a talent for seeing possibilities others missed." Zadin grinned, "Like he saw in you." She froze for a moment, then allowed herself a small smile. "Maybe that was the point. The warehouse looks worthless until you know what's inside." The first time the Guardian was deployed after the fire, it wasn't in Riverstone. It was in Colorado. A mining disaster, a collapse that had trapped 12 men nearly 2 miles underground. Heavy equipment couldn't reach them. Gas levels spiked. Every hour the situation worsened. Aracely and 2 operators flew in with 3 Guardian units. The media followed, their cameras catching every step. She ignored the lenses, focusing instead on the hum of the suit around her, the men trapped in the dark, the memories of Holloway whispering at the back of her mind. The rescue took 16 hours. They pulled all 12 miners out alive. When the last man collapsed into his family's arms, soot-covered and shaking, Aracely turned away, blinking back tears she couldn't afford to let the cameras see. Back in Riverstone, headlines screamed her name. "Guardian saves 12. from rusted hangar to miracle machine. For the first time in years, people looked at her with respect instead of pity. Harriet hugged her in the diner, eyes wet. "Told you they'd understand eventually," she said softly. Arisley's throat tightened. "You knew." "Not the details," Harriet admitted. "But James mentioned once he was working on something that would change everything. Said he needed someone trustworthy to carry it forward. I knew he meant you." Arisley looked down at her coffee, unable to speak. Outside the diner window, she caught Superintendent Westerland staring, her calculating eyes filled with a new kind of unease. The town's power structures were shifting, and not everyone liked it. But for Arisley, the changes weren't about politics, they were about people. Every rescue tested her in new ways. Fires, collapses, chemical spills. She watched strangers weep as loved ones were pulled from death's grip. She saw first responders stand taller, emboldened by technology that made the impossible possible. And each time she thought of Holloway. She would touch the exosuit after every mission, whispering words no one else heard. "I won't let you down, Captain." But sometimes, when she was alone in the lab, doubt crept in. She saw her reflection in the Guardian's visor, her face, scarred, tired, still carrying the limp that whispered of failure. She wondered if she was really the one Holloway had meant to carry this forward, or if he had simply run out of better options. Late at night, she would sit in the silent lab, surrounded by machinery and expectation, and whisper into the emptiness, "Why me?" The only answer was the soft hum of systems still alive. Dunaway, meanwhile, did not disappear. Though the Pentagon had curtailed his access, his shadow lingered. He sat in meetings, lobbying for oversight. He whispered to allies that rescue technology without military application was wasted potential. His smile remained polished, but his eyes burned when they found her name in the headlines. Arisley knew he was waiting for her to stumble. And that knowledge drove her harder. She poured everything into Holloway's vision. Upgrades, refinements, testing with firefighters, paramedics, disaster teams. Her team grew, her purpose sharpened. Still, sometimes, she would slip away to the cemetery. Holloway's grave was simple, tucked beneath an oak tree. She would kneel there, placing her sealed trident against the granite, and speak to him softly. "You were right," she would murmur, "they see it now." And sometimes, when the wind stirred the branches overhead, it felt like he answered. By the end of the third month, the warehouse was unrecognizable. The rusted shell remained, but inside it had become something else entirely. Clean corridors, bright labs, the sign over the door read Holloway Innovation Center. Engineers from across the country walked those halls. Veterans found work that gave their scars meaning. Students toured, wide-eyed, scribbling notes. Riverstone itself began to change. Boarded shops reopened. Families moved back. The town, once decaying, pulsed with new life. Arisley would stand on the roof at dusk, the town lights glowing below, the distant cemetery marked by shadows. She would whisper into the horizon, "You gave me more than a warehouse, Captain. You gave this town a second chance." And in her chest, for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't let herself believe in. Hope. What happens when the world's weight suddenly lands on your shoulders? The call came before dawn. Arisley hadn't even taken off her boots from the night before when the secure line buzzed in her office. Colonel Reeves' voice crackled through, steady but urgent. A massive earthquake hit the Pacific Rim. Entire neighborhoods collapsed, thousands trapped. The State Department is mobilizing international assistance. We need Guardian units on site immediately. Arisley rubbed her eyes, exhaustion pressing down on her skull. "How many can I deploy?" "How many do you have?" Reeves countered. "4 fully functional with trained operators," Arisley said after a pause. "2 more in testing. I can expedite them." "Perfect. I'll send a transport plane. Be ready in 3 hours." 3 hours. She hung up the phone, staring at the warehouse-turned laboratory. Empty coffee cups littered the desk. Schematics lay in overlapping piles. Her team, half asleep in bunks tucked into corners of the building, would wake to news that would change everything. The Guardian wasn't just Riverstone's miracle anymore. It was about to step into the world. The airstrip was still dark when the transport plane roared to life. 6 Guardian units were loaded, strapped down with military precision. Aracely and her small team boarded with them, Zadin, ever loyal, along with 2 veterans who had taken to the technology like second skin. As the engines lifted them skyward, Aracely sat pressed against the metal wall, staring at the suits secured across from her. Each one gleamed faintly in the dim light, silent giants waiting to be awakened. She touched the edge of her helmet resting in her lap. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes scarred down her jawline, a face worn by more battles than she cared to count. "Captain," she whispered under the roar of the engines, "I hope I'm ready for this." The devastation in the Pacific Rim was worse than anything she'd imagined. Collapsed buildings stretched for blocks, rubble piled like mountains. Smoke choked the sky. Sirens wailed in a dozen languages. Families screamed names into the ruins, searching for voices that didn't answer back. Aracely felt her chest tighten as she stepped off the plane. This wasn't a rescue mission. This was a war zone. Only the enemy was Earth itself. Reporters swarmed, cameras snapping, but Reeves cleared them back. "Focus on the mission," she reminded. Aracely nodded, though the chaos clawed at her nerves. The first day blurred into hours of grueling work. The Guardian suits pushed into collapsed towers, their sensors scanning for survivors, their strength lifting debris that would have taken cranes. The neural interface fed data directly into Aracely's mind: vibrations, heat signatures, air quality. She felt the structures like living creatures, their bones cracked, their breath shallow, their silence heavy with the weight of lives buried beneath. She guided her unit carefully, methodically. Every movement carried risk. One wrong lift and a survivor could be crushed. By the end of the first night, they had pulled out 37 survivors. By the end of the third day, the count had doubled. But the toll was brutal. Inside the suit, hours stretched into eternity. Sweat pooled at her spine, muscles cramped. Her head pounded from the constant feed of data. Every time she removed the helmet, the world outside felt too quiet, too empty, like her brain was still reaching for signals no longer there. And yet she kept going. On the 7th day, she found the girl. Her sensors had detected a faint heat signature, buried 12 feet under concrete. Too small to be an adult, too weak to register clearly. "Possible child," she reported to command. "Narrow pocket, proceeding carefully." She carved her way through, stabilizing beams, shifting slabs inch by inch. Her arms trembled, though the suit bore the weight. At last she broke into a hollow space. Dust billowed, and there, under a shattered desk, was a girl no older than 8, unconscious, barely breathing. Aracely's chest clenched. Carefully, she lifted the child into her arms. As she carried her back through the ruins, the world seemed to slow. Cameras caught the moment. Families cried out. Reporters shouted her name. But Aracely barely heard them. All she felt was the fragile heartbeat against her armor, steady but faint. She emerged into daylight. The crowd erupted. But Aracely didn't smile. She couldn't. She handed the child to medics and sank to one knee, helmet still on, her breath ragged. For a long moment she stayed there, staring at the ground, shaking with something she couldn't name. Relief, exhaustion, grief. Maybe all of them. 9 days. That's how long they worked before the last Guardian was too damaged to continue. 9 days of crawling through ruins, pulling strangers into the light, watching others slip away too late. When Aracely finally boarded the plane home, she felt hollow. Her body ached. Her mind spun with faces she couldn't forget, the ones she saved and the ones she couldn't. She sat in silence as the plane crossed oceans. Her helmet lay at her feet, streaked with dust and dried blood. She couldn't bring herself to clean it. Holloway's voice echoed in her mind again. Machines are just tools. It's the purpose behind them that matters. But purpose, she realized, carried a weight that could break you. When they returned to Riverstone, the town was waiting. Crowds lined the streets holding signs, "Our heroes." Riverstone proud, children waved flags, reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. Mayor Blackwood stood at the entrance of the Innovation Center, his politician's smile beaming. "On behalf of our community," he declared loudly, "I welcome home the brave men and women who have shown the world what Riverstone stands for. When disaster struck, you answered the call." The applause thundered. Aracely stood among her team, helmet tucked under her arm. She forced herself to smile for the cameras, to nod at the mayor's words, to lift her hand in a polite wave. But inside, her chest was heavy. Later, when the crowds dispersed, her team celebrated quietly in the lab. Zadin raised a toast with sparkling cider, grinning through exhaustion. To Captain Holloway, who saw the future, and to Director Zubiri, who built it. Aracely shook her head gently. "To all of us, this is what happens when we choose to save rather than destroy." Her voice was steady, but when the others left and the lab was quiet again, she sat alone in the dark, staring at the Guardian suit standing silent in its alcove. Her whisper was barely audible. "How many more will there be, Captain? How many before I break?" The only answer was silence. General Dunaway, meanwhile, watched from a distance. The earthquake had made the Guardian world famous. Governments clamored for contracts. Corporations offered billions. But every time Aracely's condition held, rescue only. No weapons, no war. And Dunaway hated it. He sat in a Pentagon office stripped of power, reports piling on his desk. His attempt to claim the Guardian had left him under investigation, his influence diminished. Yet his eyes still burned with one thought. Zubiri won the first battle, but wars are never decided in one fight. Aracely didn't care about his shadow. She cared about the next rescue, the next life, the next time the Guardian would be needed. But alone in the quiet hours, she admitted a truth she never spoke aloud. Every time she stepped into that suit, she left a piece of herself behind. And she wondered how much of her would be left by the end. How many times can a person hold the line before it breaks? Aracely asked herself that question in silence, long after the cheering faded. The Holloway Innovation Center hummed with life, engineers working, students touring, prototypes being tested. But she felt the weight of every light overhead, every voice echoing in the halls. What had started as a secret beneath a rusted warehouse was now something larger than she could control. And she was tired. Her limp had worsened from long hours in the Guardian suit. Her eyes burned with sleepless nights. She carried faces in her mind, miners gasping for air, a child pulled from rubble, civilians whispering thanks through broken voices. Gratitude weighed as heavy as grief. She would sit alone sometimes, staring at Holloway's holographic message, playing it back again and again, as if searching for something she had missed. His voice always steadied her but never erased the question, "Why me, Captain? Why only me?" It was during one of those nights that the storm came back. General Dunaway. He returned not with lawyers this time, but with quiet offers whispered through intermediaries. Defense contractors, foreign governments, billion-dollar figures, all disguised as opportunities. He wanted the Guardian weaponized. And when Aracely refused, again and again, he finally came himself. He stood in her office one rainy evening, uninvited but somehow inevitable, his presence filling the room like smoke. His uniform was pressed, his tone polite, but his eyes burned with barely concealed rage. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment," he said flatly. The Guardian could be the greatest military advancement in decades. Instead, you're wasting it digging children out of rubble. Arisley didn't look up from her desk. Saving children isn't a waste, General. You think the world will always cheer for you. His voice sharpened. When the next war comes, and it will come, your Guardian units will be obsolete without combat integration. You'll have squandered the potential to protect our soldiers. She raised her eyes slowly, meeting his. Captain Holloway built this to save lives, not end them. That was his choice, and it's mine. Dunaway leaned closer, his shadow stretching across her desk. Holloway was a dreamer, and dreamers get people killed. You can't carry this forever, Zubiri. The weight will break you, and when it does, the project will come to those who know how to use it. Arisley's jaw clenched, but her voice remained steady. You don't understand, General. It's already breaking me, but I'd rather break than hand it to you. For the first time, Dunaway's mask slipped. His eyes widened, just a flicker, before narrowing again. He turned on his heel and left without another word. The door slammed, leaving silence heavier than before. The weeks that followed blurred. Rescues continued. Fires, floods, collapsed structures. Each mission added another scar, sometimes visible, sometimes not. Riverstone thrived, transformed by the Innovation Center. New businesses opened. Families moved in. The town square now bore a plaque with Holloway's name and hers, side by side. People smiled at her in the streets, grateful, proud. But inside she felt hollow. At night she sat at Holloway's grave, speaking words no one else would hear. I'm trying, Captain, she whispered. But every time I put on the suit, I leave a piece of myself behind. What happens when there's nothing left? The oak tree offered no answers, only the rustle of leaves in the wind. Her breaking point came during a flood. A dam collapse in another state, entire neighborhoods swallowed, dozens missing. Arisley suited up again, exhaustion dragging at her bones. The Guardian moved through waist-deep water, pulling survivors from rooftops, bracing collapsing bridges. But when a surge hit, sweeping debris toward her, she hesitated, just a heartbeat. The suit absorbed the impact, shielding her. But in that moment, just that single fleeting second, she realized how close she was to failing. Not the suit, not Holloway's design, her. Her mind, her body, her will. She returned to Riverstone that night and locked the suit away. For the first time, she couldn't bear to look at it. Her team noticed. Zadin cornered her in the lab 2 days later, his face lined with worry. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You think we don't see it, but we do. You're burning out, Ari. She tried to brush past him, but he caught her arm. Holloway didn't leave this to you so you could destroy yourself carrying it alone. He left it to you so you could build something bigger than yourself. The words struck deep. But she couldn't admit the truth out loud. That sometimes, when the suit powered on around her, she felt more machine than human. That sometimes she wondered if Holloway had chosen her not because she was strong, but because she was expendable. And then came the breaking point. Another call, another disaster, another expectation that she would suit up and save everyone. She stood in front of the Guardian, helmet in her hands, and felt nothing but dread. For the first time, she whispered aloud what had haunted her for months. I can't do this anymore. Her voice cracked, her hands trembled. She pressed her forehead against the cold metal frame, tears sliding down her cheeks. Captain, I can't carry it, not alone. The lab was silent. Machines hummed softly. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened. But inside she broke. And yet, out of that breaking came clarity. She remembered Reeves' words. Holloway didn't choose you because of your skills. He chose you because you understood what mattered. She remembered Harriet's quiet faith, Zadin's loyalty, the miner's gratitude, the child's whispered thank you. She realized the Guardian was never meant to be hers alone. It was meant to be everyone's. when Dunaway made his final move, an attempt to push emergency legislation that would seize Guardian under national security grounds. Arrowsley stood before the same Pentagon officials who had once doubted her. Her voice was steady, strong. The Guardian project isn't mine to weaponize, and it isn't yours to seize. It belongs to the people who wear it to save lives. It belongs to the firefighters who run into burning buildings, the rescuers who dig through rubble, the first responders who face floods and storms. Holloway's legacy was never about war. It was about humanity, and I will not let you turn it into anything else. Silence followed. Even the secretary's face softened with something like respect. Dunaway, seething, could only watch as his final play collapsed. For the first time, Arrowsley didn't feel alone in the fight. That night back in Riverstone, she walked into the lab with her team gathered around. She placed her hand on the Guardian's frame, her voice calm. "I can't do this alone, and I don't have to. Holloway didn't leave me a burden, he left us a beginning. This project isn't mine, it's ours. Every rescue, every life, it's carried by all of us together." The team nodded, silent but united. For the first time in months, the weight on her chest lifted. Not gone, never gone, but lighter. Arrowsley returned to Holloway's grave that evening. She knelt by the oak tree, fingers brushing the granite. "Mission still going, Captain," she whispered. "But it's not mine anymore. It's theirs too. You were right, I just needed to see it." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain. For the first time in a long time, she let herself believe she would survive this. And in that belief, a quiet strength returned. What happens to men who build their lives on power when the ground finally shifts beneath them? General Dunaway once commanded every room he walked into. His voice had filled auditoriums, his medals glittered under lights, his influence stretched into every contract and committee. But now his words fell flat. The Pentagon investigation revealed everything Holloway had left behind, every attempt Dunaway had made to misappropriate humanitarian projects, every quiet maneuver to turn rescue technology into weapons. Years of buried reports resurfaced. Patterns of greed, of ambition disguised as patriotism, laid bare. He resigned in disgrace. No headlines celebrated, no parades honored, just a terse press release, his name fading from the news cycle within days. Arrowsley heard the update sitting at her desk in the Innovation Center. Zadin brought the paper in, tossed it onto the table. "Looks like he's finished," he said simply. She nodded, eyes tracing the black and white text. She felt no satisfaction, no thrill of victory, just a quiet release as if a shadow had finally lifted. Holloway had always said legacies outlast men like Dunaway. She finally understood what he meant. Riverstone continued to change. Where once there were boarded windows, new storefronts opened. Where silence had filled the diner, laughter now spilled out at all hours. Families moved back. Children ran in the streets again. The Holloway Innovation Center had expanded to 3 buildings, humming with life and purpose. Engineers tested new Guardian prototypes in bright labs. Veterans trained recruits in simulation rooms. Students from community colleges shadowed technicians, wide-eyed with possibility. Arrowsley walked the halls daily, no longer alone. Wherever she turned, people worked, not for her but with her. One afternoon, she paused at a classroom where a group of young engineers huddled around a prototype interface. Their voices overlapped in bursts of excitement, arguing over algorithms and sensor calibration. On the wall behind them hung a framed quote, "Look beyond what others see." She smiled faintly. Holloway's words had become theirs. Colonel Reeves, now promoted to General Reeves, visited often. One morning she arrived with a group of cadets, sharp-eyed and restless, their futures still unwritten. "These are our top engineering students," Reeves explained. "We're showing them what's possible when technical expertise serves humanitarian purpose." Arrowsley guided them through the facility, nodding their curiosity. Some asked about the Guardian's neural interface, others about material tolerances, but one cadet lingered near the exosuit, gaze steady, questions sharper than the rest. "Have you considered adaptive learning algorithms?" the cadet asked. "So the suit improves response time based on operator experience." Arrowsley blinked, surprised. "We have. The Mark III incorporates that. How did you know to ask?" The cadet smiled slightly. "I studied Captain Holloway's papers. He theorized about it before the tech existed." Arrowsley felt something shift. A memory of herself, years ago, standing grease-streaked beside Holloway, brimming with ideas no one else believed in. After the tour, Reeves lingered. "That one reminds me of you," she said quietly. "The way Holloway saw you before anyone else did." Arrowsley nodded slowly. "We're always looking for new talent. The center, expanding again, will need them." That evening, the staff gathered in the main hall for a small ceremony. Arrowsley stood before a bronze bust newly unveiled. Captain Holloway, captured in quiet dignity, his expression steady, his eyes carved with compassion. The likeness wasn't perfect, but it carried his essence. She spoke softly, her voice carrying across the room. Captain Holloway believed technology should serve humanity's highest ideals. He saw beyond weapons and warfare to the possibility of machines that extend our capacity to help one another. She gestured toward the Guardian suits displayed around the room, their alloy gleaming under lights. "These aren't just tools. They're a statement. When disaster strikes, when lives hang in the balance, we choose to reach out rather than turn away." Applause filled the hall, but Arrowsley's eyes lingered on the bust. She thought of his hand on her shoulder in a desert, his voice steady in chaos, his unwavering trust when no one else believed. For the first time, she felt that trust had been honored. Later, when the hall was empty, she sat in her office reviewing internship applications. Among the stacks of papers, one caught her attention, the same cadet who had asked about adaptive algorithms. The personal statement read, "I grew up in a town much like Riverstone, where people mistake quietness for weakness and tradition for wisdom. Captain Holloway's work showed me that innovation can come from unexpected places, and that technology's highest purpose is to preserve life rather than take it." Arrowsley smiled faintly. She placed the application in the acceptance pile without hesitation. The cycle would continue. Weeks passed. Guardian units deployed across the globe, wildfires, mine collapses, floods, hurricanes. Each mission carried the center's name further, each rescue proving Holloway's vision right. Arrowsley no longer suited up for every operation. She trained others, guided them, trusted them. The Guardian wasn't hers anymore, it was theirs. But sometimes, when the lab was quiet, she walked to the alcove where the original suit stood. She would rest her hand on its frame, whispering, "Still here, Captain, still working." And in the silence, she felt less alone than ever. As spring came, Riverstone held a dedication ceremony in the town square. A plaque was unveiled, engraved with simple words. "In honor of Captain James Holloway and Director Arrowsley Zubiri, whose vision transformed not just technology, but a community. Look beyond what others see." The crowd applauded, children clapped, Harriet wept quietly at the front. Mayor Blackwood, humbled by time, spoke words of gratitude that, for once, carried no calculation. Arrowsley stood back, watching. She didn't need to be at the podium. The moment wasn't hers. It belonged to everyone who had believed. She thought of Holloway, of laughter in desert heat, of grease-stained hands, of his faith carried across years and into this moment. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe she had done enough. That evening, she returned to Holloway's grave. The oak tree swayed above, its branches heavy with new leaves. The air smelled of spring. She knelt, placing fresh flowers at the granite. "They finally understand, Captain," she whispered. Not just what you left me, but what you left all of us." Her hand lingered on the stone. "Your legacy isn't in this grave. It's out there, walking, working, saving. Every life pulled from fire, from flood, from rubble, that's you. And it always will be." For a long moment she stayed there, silent. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in amber and violet. And she knew, with a clarity that silenced every doubt, Holloway's vision had survived. Not because she carried it alone, but because she had learned to share it. Far away, Dunaway sat alone in a house stripped of accolades, his name forgotten, his power gone. He poured himself another drink, staring at the silence that now defined him. Holloway had chosen Arrowsley, and she had proven him right. For Dunaway, that truth was worse than defeat. For Arrowsley, it was peace. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition, but deserved it more than anyone else? Arrowsley thought about that often in the final year of the Innovation Center's rise. The Guardian was no longer an experiment, no longer a secret beneath rusted steel. It was a fleet, dozens of units stationed across the country and abroad. Firefighters wore them into infernos. Rescue teams used them to pull survivors from collapsed tunnels. Relief workers deployed them after tsunamis and hurricanes. Every news broadcast showed Guardian suits glowing in the dark, their operators carrying people into the light. Arrowsley rarely wore the suit anymore. Not because she couldn't, she still trained, still knew every bolt and line of code, but because it wasn't hers to wear alone. She had trained others, trusted them, released it. Holloway's vision had grown larger than one soldier, one mechanic, one broken woman with a limp. It belonged to the world now. One spring morning she walked the length of the center, sunlight spilling through glass walls. Engineers tested new exosuit variants in open chambers, lighter versions for paramedics, reinforced models for flood response, compact systems designed for search dogs. Students scribbled notes in the observation deck, excitement brimming. She paused by the display alcove where the original Guardian stood. The suit gleamed under spotlights, scarred from fire and flood, but alive with history. Her reflection stared back at her from the visor, older now, more lines around the eyes but steady. "You were right, Captain," she whispered softly. "They understand now." That evening a quiet ceremony took place in the town square. Not a parade, not a spectacle, just Riverstone gathering under the oak trees. Families, veterans, students, faces illuminated by lantern light. Mayor Blackwood, gray now, spoke with a humility that had taken years to earn. This town was dying once. Empty streets, shuttered windows, and then one of our own came back, not for glory, not for power, but because she believed in something greater than herself. Tonight, we honor Arrowsley Zubiri and the legacy she carried forward. The crowd applauded. Harriet, still serving coffee at the diner after 30 years, wiped tears from her eyes. Zadden grinned, raising a hand in salute. Children clapped, their voices rising in chants of her name. Arrowsley stood back, hands folded, almost embarrassed by the attention. She had never wanted recognition. She wanted results, lives saved, futures given back. But she allowed herself one smile, a small one, quiet. Because she knew Holloway would have smiled too. Later, when the lanterns dimmed and the crowd dispersed, she walked alone to the cemetery. The path was familiar now, worn by countless visits. The oak tree swayed gently, its branches catching the last light of dusk. Holloway's grave stood beneath it, simple as always. She knelt, resting her hand on the granite. "Mission accomplished, Captain," she whispered. "The Guardian isn't mine anymore, it's theirs, and it's saving lives just like you wanted." Her throat tightened, but she didn't fight it. Tears slipped free, soft and unashamed. "You didn't just leave me a warehouse," she continued. "You left me a second chance. You gave this town a second chance. Maybe you gave the whole world one too." She stayed there as the sky darkened, her silhouette small against the vastness of the oak. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight pressing down. She felt light. Weeks later, she sat in her office late at night, reviewing reports, Guardian deployments in California wildfires, flood rescues in Bangladesh, a collapsed mine in West Virginia. Each file was another proof of purpose. But what caught her attention was an email. It was from the cadet who had once asked about adaptive learning algorithms, now an intern at the center, leading a small team on neural response systems. The message was simple. Director Zubiri, thank you for believing in me. One day, I hope to carry this forward the way you carried Captain Holloway's vision. We won't let it die. Arisley sat back, staring at the words until her eyes blurred. A quiet laugh slipped through her exhaustion. Holloway had passed the torch to her, and now she was passing it on again. The cycle would never end, and that was the point. On a quiet evening months later, she walked the roof of the original warehouse. The sign above the doors now read Holloway Innovation Center, but the rust still showed in places. She liked it that way, a reminder of beginnings. Riverstone stretched below, lights glowing in the dusk. Families walked, stores bustled. The air carried laughter instead of silence. She stood there, alone but not lonely, breathing in the life of a town reborn. And she thought about Holloway, about every word he'd said, every look of trust, every moment where he believed in her when no one else did. Sometimes she thought she could almost hear his voice again, carried on the wind. You can fix it, Ace, I trust you. She closed her eyes, letting the words settle in her chest. For once, she didn't question why he had chosen her. For once, she believed it herself. The Guardian units would continue long after her. The center would expand, new generations building on the foundation she had carried forward. Her name might fade just as Holloway's had before hers, but the work, the rescues, the lives saved, that would remain. And maybe that was enough. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.